I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to have you along as well. Broadcasting, streaming from my backyard here in North Minneapolis. So if it's windy, apologies for the work of nature, but it's so beautiful, so warm. I hope it's beautiful and warm wherever you are as well. Today's program focuses on long COVID and recovery. We've got some special announcements for you, ways to engage you and engage each other in the healing and prevention process. We think it's going to be exciting. There's something to do after the show. So pay attention, take notes, and connect to the extension of this work that you'll be learning about from Dr. B momentarily. Before I begin, I want to, as always, invite you to support The Conversation with Al McFarlane, the Healing Circle, and the shows we do every day, 5 days a week, by subscribing to our Insight News channel at YouTube. We stream the show every day to several platforms. We're on 2 YouTube channels, one for the Black Press USA, one for Insight News MN. We stream it on 3 Facebook platforms, on Insight News Facebook, Black Press USA Facebook, and Al McFarlane Facebook pages. We stream it on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And what's the idea? The idea is to find as many touch points as possible to connect us to each other, and to do that and have what we call these robust conversations about being community, about building community. Well, again, you can support this work by going over to the YouTube Insight News MN platform or channel and subscribe. Be a subscriber. Tell all your friends to go there and subscribe. Let's build our subscriber base to, we want to get 1,000 subscribers, and we're on the way. Your action today, right now, will help us move in that direction as well. And then the other thing I want to do before we begin is talk about, and it ties in to today's program, our relationship with the Minnesota Department of Health. And they are conducting a COVID vaccine event at Kelly Regional Park from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Next week on July 3rd. It's a free event, open to the public, free food, games for kids and adults, educational activities for all ages. The Department of Health is encouraging everyone in the community to attend and get vaccinated against COVID. Make sure you're protected. Show up on July 3rd. Well, I want to begin now by bringing in my co-host and colleague, Dr. Bravada, Garrett-Akinsanya, and Dr. B. How you doing? No, you're muted. You're muted.
I was talking about you being outside in that beautiful weather when I'm stuck in the house.
Well, it's beautiful. I'll be a shade darker when this hour is over, and that's fine with me because I love it. But I want to be mindful too. I want to be mindful of skin cancer and the dangers of that. And if I need to, I'll put my shade up, But I love the idea of being out here in this space. Well, we began the program with naming and describing why we are the Healing Circle, and with a certain protocol. Maybe what we should do is invite Dr. Laura Smith and Sister Shirlynn LaChapelle in, and then have you lead us all in the protocol for the Healing Circle.
I'll be happy to do that.
Hey, Dr. Laura Smith, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Welcome. And my dear friend, Shirlynn LaChapelle. Shirlynn, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. It's wonderful to be here.
Awesome. Dr. B, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I just want to comment before we start that Dr. Laura and Nurse Shirlynn just did a wonderful in-service training for our group about long COVID and its effects, so we can recognize it in therapy. But before we go, get into the day, we always take a minute just to breathe and center and recognize that we are currently in a circle, and that the circle itself has no beginning or end. And everyone in the circle shares equal power and equal access to the source of power, which is the center of the circle, which is the place we give voice. And as we sit here today, we want to acknowledge the shoulders that we stand on, the many people who have worked their way and prayed our way into existence. So as we think of our elders, we honor them. And we honor our elders because they're closest to our ancestors. And our ancestors who are free from space, and free in space, free from body, not restricted. As we honor our ancestors, we honor the fact that they have given and laid the groundwork for our successes and even the resilience we have to overcome our failures. And we honor our ancestors because they're closest to our Creator. So as we sit in this circle of honoring, we also honor our voice and our shared power. And the way we do things is in an orderly African way. We use a talking stick to pass the conversation and the voice and the power of the voice to one another in circle. And as you'll see, we are not physically together. So we have an innovative kuumba movement of creativity where we use our talking stick virtually. So we will all be passing a talking stick as we engage today. And we will honor the fact that in all this center, we are all connected. And the African belief of consubstantiation means that all things are connected. So we're connected to the earth, the water, the sky, and to each other. And with that said, we say Ashe as we begin to open our voice and our commentary today and welcome you to the Healing Circle. And I'll give the talking stick back to Chief Al.
Well, Ashe, so let's jump right in. The topic today is, long COVID. What do we do? How do we manage? Why don't we start with the description? And I want to pass that back. Actually, Dr. B, I'm going to pass the talking stick back to you and have you set the framework for this discussion and also announce what's going to be happening. That's another innovation out of this relationship we're creating here. So I'll pass the talking stick back to you.
Hi, everyone. I appreciate that talking stick again. What I'd like to say is that we are planning an exciting event, a series of events throughout the year. And each month, the last Friday of the month, we will have a discussion about COVID, just like we're going to do today on the last Friday at our 1 o'clock Conversations with Al program. Then we will move at 2 o'clock, as we will do today, into what we refer to as our recovery room. And that's kind of like an open forum and town hall, but it's mostly a space for healing and support. So people who have experienced COVID, lost people to COVID, or who may have symptoms of long COVID, we ask you to come forward, and we as a village will hold your hand and your heart and your spirit as we go through this process together. So every month, on the last day of the month, you will join us after this program on a Zoom program, a Zoom link that we will give you today so that you can join us next month. And we'll be advertising every week, I'm sure, to remind people to come next month to the last Friday to join us in Conversations with Al and keep that conversation going as we interview different people and as we begin our internal dialogue of safety and support. So that's what's going to be happening. And I appreciate having that talking stick. I think I'll pass it now to the nurse who knows about the biological components of COVID and long COVID. Here is the talking stick, Sister Shirlynn.
Well, hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be among you again. And I will be coughing, but I don't have COVID. I have allergies. Today, we want to basically talk about the the disproportionate effect that COVID and long COVID has on the Black community. It also has a disproportionate effect on other communities of color, but somehow the Black community is the star of the show, whereas it's impacted us most. Upon reading a lot of the research, what I gleaned from that had a lot to do with the social determinants of health as suffered by our community and the people within. The systemic racism, the lack of adequate employment, the lack of adequate health care or health care that we feel safe enough to access, or the mistrust that we have in the system itself. Also, the over-policing of our communities and the violence received from the police department, who were supposed to serve and protect, but as many know, they have been less than protecting. They've been more on the damage side. Our mental illness, which Dr. Laura will talk about, but I'll just briefly touch on that. How can you be healthy when you're stressed, you don't have things that you need, and that you're in fear most of the time? And those stress hormones hitting your body, your brain, your heart, and other body organs takes its toll to the point that medication may not work as meant to. Now, long COVID, for those of you who don't know, is the sequelae of illnesses, organ failure, things that happen after you've had COVID. But some people who had very mild cases of COVID and they didn't have to go to the hospital, they might have had a fever, they might have felt like they had a cold, they might have lost their taste for a minute, but then rebounded, it wasn't serious. But a month or 2 months down the aisle, they may come up with these strange symptoms where they might become short of breath. They might be unable to walk as far as they used to. They might start forgetting things, not being able to focus or concentrate. And no, it's not ADHD. They have come up with a term called brain fog. And this brain fog is some of the damage, the inflammation that occurs from COVID causes in the brain and other organs. There might be people who have developed blood clots in limbs, and this happened mostly in hospitals with COVID of patients who were really ill, and it happened fairly quickly to the point that some had to have limbs cut off, legs, hands, fingers, arms. So good God, there are athletes who were distant runners, basketball players, football players, who can no longer do their sport. But that isn't the most awful part. They can't even take a long walk along the beach or do things. They require oxygen. Some have chest pain with just minimal effort. So I'm cutting to the chase as far as some of the symptoms. Some of you may know people like this who said, I don't know why this is happening to me. I had COVID, but it wasn't much. And then it was over and I was fine. And now this. Some of the research has shown quite a bit that when people of color, and particularly Black people of color, go to their provider talking about these various symptoms they're having, they're poo-pooed, they're not listened to. They're saying, oh, it's just a cold. Oh, you probably have asthma. That's why you're short of breath. Oh, it's this or that. Oh, it's probably arthritis. Because you can get fibromyalgia-like symptoms. There's all kinds of things that occur with long COVID. And that's because COVID attacks every organ in the body. And the brain is an organ, the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, the pancreas, and the skin's an organ. Some people have awful rashes. And why? We don't know. But during the height of COVID, I'll say 2021, they discovered that some children had, 2020 for the children, had something called multi-system inflammation. And then by 2021, they noticed adults had it as well, but they hadn't diagnosed it yet. And they hadn't been really having any symptoms of COVID, very mild, very mild. But some of these symptoms were the heart became affected, heart failure, they'd have erratic heartbeat, all kinds of things, brain fog. And it's like, how is this happening? Blood clots. And nobody really understood what was causing this. So the research finally narrowed it down to inflammation. For those of you who don't know what inflammation is not infection. It's the body's response to an invading whatever, organism, virus, what have you. And it responds by swelling, sometimes creating exudate or extra fluid in the lungs. You cough up sputum and stuff like that. In the case of the heart, when those vessels swell, that could impact your heart's ability to work as a pump. In the lungs, you can imagine breathing's an issue. In the vessels, depending on where the inflammation occurs, if it's the legs, once the swelling starts inside the vessels, blood's more easy to clot. And once it clots, if that clot breaks loose and it travels through the body, if it goes to the brain, that would be what we consider a stroke caused by a blood clot. If it goes to the heart, that's a heart attack caused by that same blood clot. Kidneys, any organ in the body, including the penis, anywhere there is circulation, this can happen. So for those of you, men and women, who say, I don't need that shot, I don't believe that, I heard, social media said, I believe, oh, those shots are dangerous. Let me know what's more dangerous than having a blood clot to the brain, a stroke, and you started out today walking, talking, running, and depending on where that blood clot lands in the brain or circulation it cuts off, the portion of the brain that operates whatever that is, you're walking, talking, smelling, eating, thinking, that's what's affected. Your kidneys, for those that think they don't need it, how's dialysis? And I am sure we all know somebody that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, they spend 4 hours each of those days going to dialysis. Yes. That's not fun. So I think we need to really take this seriously. Then I'm sorry.
I was going to say, as I listen to you, I have a couple of just burning questions. Okay. And I know that you've worked a lot with people who are coming for vaccines and who are hesitant to get vaccines. And I know that you tell them the facts you're sharing with us today. And my question is around, when you start trying to convince people about taking vaccines, is it that you tell them what will happen if they don't? So what advice would you have to give to us in the audience in terms of how we could increase ourselves, our courage, and increase our engagement in getting people to just take the vaccine? Do you have to go through all of the long COVID symptoms before people change their mind? What do you do, sister?
What I do is a conversation. And I don't give them the whole spiel. I basically ask them, why? Why is it that you don't feel that you should have the vaccine? What are you afraid of? And then I listen to that. And of course, with our people, they always talk about Tuskegee. And of course, I'm forced to tell them the facts that what happened in Tuskegee was not treatment or vaccine. Mm-hmm. It was lack of treatment that killed them. They were basically observed with syphilis as they watched to see how each stage would turn out and how people would die from it. When there was penicillin that they could have been given at any point, but it was withheld. So I tell them, let's take Tuskegee off the table, okay? But when they say, well, I'm not going to be a lab rat anyway, well, I say, Have you noticed how many white people are at all these shot centers getting shots and everything? Even in the Black community, my God, I might see 5 or 10 people and they're giving 1,000 shots that day. And they're from the suburbs and everything, white people coming to get that. At that point, you know it's not experimentation. At that point, you know it's preventative and it's life or death. And I listened to their question, to their objections, and I answered them with facts. And then we might have to discuss it a bit. Oh, I don't believe it. You know, they said it causes autism, those other shots. And I said, well, that doctor was proven to have faked his research. I think he went to prison for a while and he lost his medical license in England. Also, how many of you know somebody who has polio? Most people look around and they don't know anyone. I said, do you know before the Salk vaccine came, people were dying and becoming paralyzed with polio? But during your lifetime, it's a thing of the past. But guess what? It's coming back. I mean, it was always present in the soil and the environment, but because people have stopped getting immunized against it, diphtheria is here. People die of suffocation when their throats swell. But we have a vaccine to prevent that. Measles, mumps, rubiola, all of that. Mumps. You say you want children and you're a man, you get mumps, you could become sterile. You know, just something to think about. All these things that have made those diseases something of the past. Well, guess what? They're back and they're here and they're getting stronger. Well, they were always strong, but now we don't have the immunity. That's what I say.
Thank you, sister. If you don't mind, I'd like to pass the talking stick to Dr. Laura, because it sounds like you're talking about some psychological issues that may be why people don't get shots and the reaction to them with long COVID. And Baba Al, let me know if you want this talking stick, because I know you get excited with good questions. I'm going to pass it to Dr. Laura for now, but you know, free game.
All right. Well, I guess I'm up if Mr. Al, you're not going to go. Hi, everybody. Yes, there's a lot of risk factors in COVID and long COVID, I will say, for adults, but also kids as well, too. Through research, a lot have shown that there's an increased risk for traumatic stress and also grief and loss. A lot of research has pointed to a range of different emotional reactions to long COVID, including anxiety, depression, again, grief, and also even suicidal ideation. This pandemic has created so much devastation for so many individuals, especially those who have unfortunately lost a loved one. And some of that, the increased traumatic stress comes with compounding factors. So our most vulnerable population, including young kids, are more susceptible to traumatic stress and loss, but also people who have previous mental health histories, trauma histories, and of course, our folks, people of color. And so the research really points to, again, the inequities and disproportional rates of long COVID with our community, but also, again, those compounding factors that also go along with being a part of a community of color, unfortunately, where there's not the same amount of access to these vaccines. And even when vaccines are available, the access is just not the same. There's been a lot of research that shows that when vaccines are given to communities, a lot of the white folks get them and not a lot of the Black folks even know where to find them or have the access to get to them. And so, unfortunately, again, there's a disproportionate rate of death among African Americans compared to white individuals. And so with that, again, traumatic stress comes along with that. Depression, if you are experiencing, a loss of a loved one, and it really impacts everybody's mental health. And also even it's shown that with all of the pandemic, our world has drastically changed. And so we all know that we had to adjust to things that typically we were used to, just freely going to the store or going to sporting events or anything like that. And now you would have to weigh out, is it worth actually going out and potentially being exposed or not? But also other risks come with that. With a lot of parents had to be teachers and learn how to do the remote schooling, which was very, very challenging. But also it showed that, unfortunately, since a lot of people were staying at home together in the same household, an increase in violence also occurred, and child abuse. And unfortunately, hospitals even reported a higher incident of child abuse, to the point where more children were being hospitalized for their injuries. And so, again, families under stress really impact the entire family unit, that sometimes maybe people don't think about, or think about the impact that it has on the littlest ones in our community. So those are some of the risks, some of the mental health things that have come up, that I'll touch on now. Maybe I'll save some for later, but I will pass the talking stick back to Mr. Al.
You're muted, brother. You're muted again.
Oh, still muted.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Hit the button and take your hand away, right? Listen, what a wonderful, wonderful conversation. So important, so much information, so rich. And for me, it brings me to considering, the gravity, the immensity of the COVID-19 virus or epidemic or pandemic impact on our community, on the world, and our community in particular, and how that aggregates or exacerbates the already storied health disparities we experience. And so my question becomes, Dr. Smith and Nurse Shirlynn and Dr. B, how do we, as a community, assemble an approach that recognizes a super predator in COVID-19 and a upsized super predator when you add that to historic inequity, historic disparity, systemic racism, whose intent was the continued marginalization and suppression of our people, our culture, and the theft of our lives and our liberty for the financial, economic gain of others, the colonists, right? How do we take all of that and convert all of that into a super accelerator for freedom, knowledge, independence, and power? Our response has to be, it seems to me, reflective of our will to resist and to be resilient and to come out of the other end of crises as we have, stronger, better, and operating and reflecting the regenerative power of existence itself. How do we move our thinking to that level where we operate attuned to, knowledgeable of the work of regeneration, and focused on that, guided by that, in creating relationships, policies, practices among us that protect us and that actually allow us to continue our unfolding into the best human beings we can be for ourselves and for the rest of humanity? Boy, that's a big question. Dr. Smith, I'm going to pass it back to you first of all, because I want to focus on the psychology of how we see ourselves, and both individually and collectively. How do we take this lemon and make lemonade, make something better, something never seen before, that advances us individually and collectively, and therefore advances humanity and existence itself? Dr. Smith, I'm passing the talking stick back to you.
Oh boy, that's a loaded question. That's a lot rolled into one. Well, I think first and foremost, we all know that we have to start with ourselves, and we have to start with the wellness of ourselves, which includes mental health. And so if you're not well, how are you going to then promote that to other people in the community? And what is that going to look like? So I believe it really starts within yourself. So if you are struggling with COVID or long COVID, then I would say to seek help professionally if you really are experiencing severe mental health symptoms. And so I know historically in the Black community, it is hard to ask for help outside of the family or outside of church or things like that. But it is really important to find a therapist who you trust, which again is very difficult, where you can sit down and explore the emotional side of things that you're experiencing, because it is a lot. And not just for maybe you as an individual, but if you have children or other family members living in your home, that would also be critical to have them all be a part of that therapy, because it affects everybody in the family, not just somebody personally. And so I think that would be one big step, to bettering the community. I think also with that, thinking about just normalizing some of the mental health emotions of depression and anxiety that are common, that come along with having COVID and long COVID. The feelings that you have are normal. You're not quote unquote crazy. It's a lot that you're dealing with, and it is okay to feel those feelings. And I think that part is important to also realize, that it's important to give yourself grace, that nobody has gone through this. Our country has never gone through this. And if you're experiencing that long COVID, it's going to look different in everybody. And so to really give yourself grace, your life is completely different, unfortunately, but also learning how your life will be different and giving yourself grace, along that pathway. I'll maybe just stop there. There's a lot more that I could say, but I will pass the talking stick maybe to Dr. B that can kind of piggyback on some of the other mental health areas.
Thank you, Dr. Laura. And I think it was exceptional what you just said in teaching us. One of the first things I thought about when you asked that powerful question, Baba Al, is that as Dr. Laura said, we do have to start with ourselves, and we also have to start with recognizing that we have overcome other things, recognizing that resilience and resistance does not mean you have to do it alone, and that strength can also come from asking for help, for coalescing, co-creating solutions to problems that we face, and not feeling like we have to do it alone. That's the first thing I think that hit me. The other thing is that when we talk about the disparities among African Americans, we cannot overlook the idea that in America, historically, just like having that crazy Supreme Court ruling yesterday that we were talking about, just recognizing that people still don't want to see us as human, and how that internalized racism and oppression, sometimes we own it. Like we say, we're not worth it, or it won't matter if I vote, or it doesn't matter if I go to the doctor. And so part of my mantra is that we deserve to be well, and the same creator that made them made us. And in fact, they say that we, Black folks from Africa, we're the source of all life. Eve and Adam, the Garden of Eden, according to sciences, was from the wombs of a Black woman. So as we think about our right to be well, we got to recognize that no matter who we have to fight, and sometimes it's our own internalized fears and pain and anguish that stops us, we have to overcome it. And I believe we can, with help, with people who see you as a full, vibrant, wonderful creation, as a human being with gifts and talents. You can claim your healing and start to work toward it. And they will push you when you get weak. They will help pick you up when you fall. So that's what I wanted to say, to kind of round in and encapsulate what I'm hearing my sister say today. So I give the stick back to you, Baba Al.
Well, I'm going to pass over to nurse practitioner Shirlynn LaChapelle. You know, what's your take on this? What are your thoughts? We talk about this all the time. How do we empower our people? How do we change our minds and reflect the best of us and for us in our minds and therefore in the world? What do you think, Sister Shirlynn? Unmute. There we go.
I think this will be a new thing for some of our folks, because we're so often beaten down, torn down, demoralized, and made to feel less than. Mm-hmm. But what I tell patients that I treat in psychiatry is that you are worth it. You are stronger than you know. You are more brilliant than you know. You are here for a purpose. That purpose is not about you. It's about what you can do for others. And once you realize how important you are to what life is happening all around you, then you realize you have the strength within to change those things that are controlling you. It's so important for our people to understand that they are strong, that they are valued, and that we come from a great people, a brilliant people, and that don't believe the garbage that you've been told. Break out of that slave mentality where you feel that you are nothing. You are more than anyone will ever tell you. And I think once they realize who they really are, then they will stand up straight, stop the killing, stop hurting other people that look like them because of self-hatred that this society has foisted on them, and realize that they can have an impact on the health of the community. And I think a good place to start is with youth, training them to be ambassadors of health. So we take teenagers in, we can even have them younger than that. Because when seatbelts started, my husband wasn't having it. He wasn't going to wear one. But our daughter, because the commercials kept saying, Daddy, you need to put your seatbelt on. Dad, if we get in an accident, you may die. And he got sick of hearing it, and he started wearing that seatbelt. So I think we are missing a group of teachers that we haven't accessed yet. And I have a lot of faith in young people being able to carry the message once they are educated as to all the facts, and to be able to hold their own when talking to people who have false facts. And I really would like to see them engaged. So I will pass the talking stick back to Dr. B.
All I can say is that amen. And the future, seeing that it is in our children and pouring into their spirits, the concept of being able to be enough. I love that you said that, because one of the things is that people shortchange our kids. Sometimes we shortchange our kids, and we don't really realize their potentials. But when we do realize it and we let them know that I'm holding you accountable for the greatness within you, that changes their mindset, and taking time to let them see what it means to help, what it means to be a part of a community that's bigger than yours, what it means to share your gifts and talents and have people applaud what you bring, whether it's baking cookies, helping with math, babysitting, whatever kids do, singing in the church choir, whatever they do, we need to support it, because if they can believe they have power, and I'm telling you, the kids now do, a lot of them do. They believe they have power, then they'll see that this mess that they're dealing with, the systemic mess that keeps us locked down, they can overcome it, and they will. And when I think about long COVID, I just think about the pain of it, and the ripping off of our sense of I guess agency, not being able to do what we want to do, how we want to do it, when we want to do it, with whom we want to do it. the impact of that long COVID making you weak and tired and having brain fog and losing appetite and all the things that impact not just that, but employment and your ability to make a living. That we have to continue to just educate ourselves and create support. So I'll pass the talking stick back to Baba Al.
Thank you, Dr. B. I'll take the talking stick. So Shirlynn, I think you or Dr. B mentioned the campaign. Shirlynn, you mentioned the campaign for seatbelts, and that reminded me of another effective public campaign that our country did. And you all will remember, Dr. Smith, you won't, but in the 50s, they did the trash campaign. I mean, we used to have people just thought it was okay to throw stuff out of their window, right? You eating some saltine crackers and some cheese on a highway trip or some apples and stuff, and you would just eat it, take the paperwork out the window. And the operative thought was everything is kind of going back to nature. Okay to throw it out, it'll decompose or whatever, or it wasn't a concern. But the roads got dirtier and dirtier, trashier and trashier, and it rose to something that was a national, crisis deserving public attention. And what our country did is mounted an effective campaign where people now are conscious, aware, and they, by and large, don't throw stuff out on the street. So the lesson here with both seatbelts and with trash is marketing. So, Dr. Smith, can we come up with a marketing strategy using the science of marketing, and we can point to case after case after case of building public awareness in ways that produce benefit for individuals and society? Ought we be able to come up with a marketing strategy that intentionally infuses within our culture and within our children this idea that Dr. B has just described, that we are great, and here's how greatness looks, and here's what greatness does, and how this idea of greatness then moderates, regulates our activity with each other, and when we're alone. We're bound by a sense of ethics of what is right to do, what is not right, and we live by what is right. I think that can be trained. They tried to train away by encouraging us to not believe in ourselves and to believe that we were bankrupt or deficient or less than. And I think that we have discovered that we have both resilience and ability to transcend and continue our path towards becoming our true, authentic selves, that being great people. So we also said that we believe that children have a great power to be themselves and to get the complexity of life and to act on it in ways that influence and redirect adults, the elders. And if that be the case, how do we protect and prevent ourselves from crippling our children by robbing them of that capacity to tell the truth that is natural to them, in them, that they own, but that we encourage them to suppress in order to make it in a world that's stacked against them? Dr. Smith, I'm putting a lot on your plate. I'm going to pass the talk back to you.
Oh my goodness. We don't have time for all of that unpacking. That is a lot. But I think what you said is, what does it look like to speak the truth, not cripple, protect, all those key words that you said. And I think the number one thing is honesty. I think we have to be truthful to kids, even young kids. They know what's going on. They might not have the words to fully explain or completely understand, but they know. They read, caregivers' body language. Mm-hmm. If a caregiver is scared or mad, they know what that is. They might not say, oh, mommy or daddy is, scared or mad right now, but they know. And I think that it's developmentally appropriate to tell them the truth in ways that they understand. Maybe you don't need to give them all the details, but an overall generalization of what is happening or the truth out of things is important. And I can think of one example of just the idea of death. A lot of people want to not tell the truth about death to really, really young kids because it's scary, and it is scary. But I've heard, some caregivers say, well, mommy or daddy is sleeping, or mommy and daddy, went to school. It's like, oh no, because they don't ever come back. And that's not the message that you want to send to kids. You want to tell them the truth. Even if it's hard for you to say it, they also need to understand and have closure and be able to process in their way, what is going on. And so I think that's the same with.
What's the challenge, Doctor? What's the challenge of our having to confront our own failure? And when we knew what was right and what was wrong, but when we were confronted or faced with the institutional dilemma, we backed away, or we decided that the choice that we had to make was one where we surrendered something. Could be our dignity, could be our power, and we did it probably out of a sense of fear or out of a sense of history, because we knew what the consequences for truth-telling would be. And so what does that kind of example that the children see, and you don't say it, but they know when you talk about being truthful at home, then they see you get stopped by a cop and you change. What does that do? How do we come up with the path, either that explains that in a way that's proper, or that encourages us not to have to go through that shame and to be ourselves, but also we have to stay here. I know we make decisions like that because we know we have to stay alive to help our children, our families. But that's an extreme case, so I'm sorry to jump in. I'm going to pass it right back to you.
That's okay. I mean, that makes sense too. I think it revolves a lot of reflection, on an adult, and what example do you want to lead for your kids? In some situations, maybe you do kind of have to tell a lie, but also maybe later telling your kids why you did what you did, apologize, and kind of move forward. But it's not easy, because oftentimes we parent how we're parented until we stop and think about, is this what I want to continue, or this is my chance to do it differently? So I guess I'll leave it there. I'll pass the talking stick to Dr. B.
Well, thank you, Dr. Laura. As you were talking, I was actually thinking about, how do we tell the truth to the systems? And I guess that's the same thing, not just to the individual children or people around us who are relatively safe, but we don't want to mess up their heads. But how do we tell the truth to the systems? Because one of the things that we were talking about earlier today in our training is how the doctors, the people who had long COVID, couldn't get support because the doctors wouldn't acknowledge that there was Black pain in their body. Or the woman who was the doctor herself, they say things like, she's too bossy, she doesn't know, doesn't know how to be a patient. And so recognizing our pain is one of the things I think we need to be able to teach those who care for us, and challenge them and actually say, do you hear me? It seems like you're not recognizing my pain. It seems to me like you're minimizing what I'm bringing. I know even recently in my own health, I went to see a male doctor, and he saw me about 30 seconds and said what he thought it was. And that wasn't what it was. And I was really upset because the treatment he gave me didn't work. And finally I went to another doctor, and she was a white woman. And one of the things I said to her is, I went to this other doctor. He saw me for 30 seconds and said he knew what it was. How can I trust you? How do I know that what you're telling me is saying I don't have cancer? How do I know that that's true? And so she took the time, because I challenged her. And I decided that I wasn't going to just take it, that wherever I go, I'm going to lovingly and professionally, but I challenged her. And I said, why is it not what you say it is? And so she had to teach me, and I listened. And by the time I got through, she kind of went overtime with me. Another patient was waiting, but that day I didn't care too much because I felt like the system was due me some honesty. And so after that, I trusted her. And that's what I think we have to learn to do, is to challenge the system. And with that, I'll give the talking stick to Sister Shirlynn, because we're getting close to the end of the show. So I don't want us to close down without her having another word.
Oh, Lord. Well, what I want to say is I want to give the symptoms of long COVID for Black people in particular. They're the same for most people, but why I want to say for Black people, because we have so many pains, headaches, things wrong, and we have to just fight on through. Well, instead of fighting on through, I want you to think about it. Brain fog. I can't remember anything. I can't add 2 and 2. It's just, I just feel my head feels heavy. Things like that. Thirst. You're really thirsty, not abnormally thirsty. And if you've ever seen a dialysis patient, they're always thirsty. In the hospital, they will drink their bath water. We had to watch them. Not saying you'll do that, but you'll be very thirsty. Heart palpitations, your heart, you feel it kind of thumping heavy in your chest. You know, it's like somebody like tapping you. Chest pain, we know what that is, or that heavy feeling in our chest. Fatigue, really feeling exhausted, really, really tired. Then diminished sexual desire. Now that's huge on both genders, okay? But males would be more alarmed, I'm sure. Dizziness, that's huge. That's part of the brain fog. You know, if you're dizzy, you can't walk without maybe falling. Driving, dangerous, many things. So dizziness, that's huge. Gastrointestinal issues, nausea, vomiting, upset stomach, you try to eat, or you can't eat because every time you try, you just feel nauseous. Then there are abnormal movements such as tremors, Parkinsonian-like movements. People with Parkinson's disease have these kind of jerky movements and things like that. Those are things that we need to pay attention to. Now, outside of those things, the Black physicians, they put a paper on about long COVID. And what they said significantly that affects Black people in particular more than any other of those was insomnia that had long COVID. And that means you have difficulty sleeping. And you might be able to fall asleep, but an hour later you're tossing and turning and you just can't go back. Or you may have difficulty falling asleep and you're laying there just trying, and then somewhere along the line you might sleep for an hour or two, but you're exhausted in the daytime. So they have found for instances like that, taking melatonin has been helpful, and that's over the counter, like 4 milligrams or something, but also tell your doctor about your symptoms. If you have a provider, like Dr. B said, that first provider who she couldn't talk to, it's time for a change, okay? Your provider has got to be someone that listens to you and that you can tell them what's going on with you because your life depends on it. You don't have time for a provider who won't listen to you or who takes your concerns and say, oh, it's just probably arthritis. Oh, do you drink a lot? Do you do this a lot? Are you smoking marijuana? You know what I mean. They got every reason why you're feeling the way you're feeling instead of investigating what you're saying to see what they can do or provide answers or tests or whatever. But the final thing that I want to say is that they have found with people with brain fog, when they've done CAT scans and MRIs of the brain, they were completely normal. And so they have registered these symptoms and the lack of verifiable test results as a symptom of brain fog and long COVID. And many people who have disabilities, well, it's hard to get Social Security to approve your disability status, even though you're clearly disabled. My last thought, this is for you, Dr. B and Al. I think we need to try to get a grant in the community to train young people to be community health workers. I'm talking about grammar school and high school. I'm talking about teaching these kids things that they need to know about COVID and about being healthy, because they live at home with their parents who are drinking, smoking, not eating properly, not taking their medicine. And if you got one of those champions of health in there, a whole lot's going to happen differently. So I think that's a grant that we should have. And I think those kids should be given a stipend while they train, and they should be paid for their time out in the community, because let me tell you, that'll make a difference. So I'm going to pass the talking stick back to Al.
Hey, this is Dr. B, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to especially say thank you to Brother Al, Sister Shirlynn, and Dr. Laura for joining us as we look forward to going into the next part of the show. Please join us. Also remember the COVID-19 vaccine event, but also join us right after this is over for a Zoom town hall about COVID, where we will talk about it and give community voice. Remember the Community COVID-19 Vaccine Commit event that's at Keller Regional Park, and it's going to be Monday, July 3rd from 11 till 3 p.m. Again, food, people are welcome, but more importantly, get your hookup with your home test kits and your boosters. So thank you all for joining us. I say see you later. Till next time on the Healing Circle and Conversations with Al.